She had lost all hope after everything he did. The cowboy showed her hope was still possible. Clara had always been someone people described as strong. Even when life threw hard times her way, she carried herself with a quiet determination that inspired those around her. Friends often marveled at how she could manage her work, her home, and still make time for the people she cared about. But the truth was, strength had its limits, and Clara had reached hers. The years she had spent with Mark, her husband, had slowly worn her down, piece by piece, until she barely recognized the woman staring back at her in the mirror. It had started like many relationships, hopeful, passionate, full of laughter. Mark was charming, attentive, and seemingly caring. When they first met, Clara had been swept off her feet by his easy smile and the way he made her feel seen. She had felt a sense of excitement, like life had finally found its missing piece. But the reality of marriage slowly revealed itself, and the cracks started to show. What had seemed like small inconveniences at first became persistent, draining challenges. Mark had a way of twisting words, of turning small disagreements into major conflicts, and of making Clara feel guilty for things she had no control over. Over time, Clara realized that Mark's charm had a limit, and it often masked deeper issues. He was controlling, sometimes cruel, and often dismissive of her feelings. She remembered nights where she sat alone in their dimly lit living room, watching the shadows dance on the walls, wondering if she had done something wrong. She would replay every conversation, every disagreement, searching desperately for answers that never came. The sense of betrayal grew with each broken promise and each harsh word. The man she had loved and trusted had slowly become a stranger, someone whose actions left her questioning her own worth. Financial stress had added another layer to her growing despair. Mark had promised to support the family, but his recklessness with money left Clara constantly worrying. Bills piled up, late fees accumulated, and more than once she found herself covering expenses he had promised to handle. Friends had tried to offer help, suggesting loans or careful budgeting, but the constant strain had become exhausting. Clara felt trapped in a cycle where no matter how hard she worked or how carefully she planned, life seemed determined to push her down. But it wasn't just the financial problems that weighed heavily on her. The emotional toll was far greater. She had once believed in the idea of unconditional love, in the possibility that people could grow and change. Mark had shown her that not everyone was capable of that, and the realization left a deep scar. Clara's sense of trust had been shattered. She found herself second-guessing every interaction, questioning whether anyone could be genuine. Even friends and family noticed a shift in her demeanor. The bright, lively woman who had once laughed freely and shared her dreams openly now spoke cautiously, her words measured and guarded. Her children became both her greatest joy and her heaviest responsibility. She loved them more than anything, but she worried constantly about the impact of her broken marriage on their lives. Every argument, every cold silence between her and Mark seemed to leave a mark on them. Clara wanted to protect them from the pain, but she also knew that some things could not be hidden. She watched them grow, hoping they would learn resilience from her strength, even as she felt her own resilience faltering. One evening, after another grueling day, Clara found herself sitting alone in the quiet of her home. The house was dark except for the soft glow of the kitchen light. Her children were asleep upstairs, and Mark had gone out, leaving a note that seemed more like an afterthought than communication. Clara's hands rested on her knees as she let out a long, weary sigh. She thought about the years of hope she had poured into a relationship that had ultimately brought more pain than joy. The thought of continuing like this, of maintaining the fragile peace that barely existed, felt unbearable. Memories of better times haunted her. She remembered their first trip together, a small vacation to the mountains where the air had smelled of pine and the sky had been impossibly blue. She remembered laughing until her stomach hurt, feeling a sense of connection she had never known before. But those memories were bittersweet now, like a photograph that had faded with time. They reminded her of what could have been and what had been lost. Clara realized that she had been living in survival mode for years, focusing on what needed to be done rather than what she wanted for herself. She had sacrificed her own dreams, her own happiness, and sometimes even her own sense of identity just to keep the family afloat. She had always believed that love required compromise, that marriage meant enduring hardships together. but she began to understand that enduring endless hurt was not the same as love. And for the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel the full weight of grief, disappointment, and exhaustion. The feeling of hopelessness was overwhelming. Clara had always believed in the possibility of better days, in the chance that life could improve if only she worked hard enough, if only she loved enough. But after all that had happened, after all the lies, the broken promises, the emotional manipulation, she wasn't sure she could believe in anything anymore. The light at the end of the tunnel seemed distant, if it existed at all. In the weeks that followed, Clara's life became a routine of going through the motions. She woke up early to get her children ready for school, prepared breakfast, drove them to their activities, and managed her own work. Yet, each day felt heavier than the last. She moved through life like a shadow, present but not fully alive. Small moments of joy, like a child's laughter or a friend's phone call, were fleeting and often overshadowed by the lingering pain of her past. Even when she tried to find solace in hobbies or personal time, she felt the weight of despair pressing down. A book she once loved felt empty in her hands. A walk in the park brought no peace. Every plan she made for herself was tinged with doubt, every hope clouded by the fear that nothing could truly change. She began to withdraw from social interactions, avoiding friends who once brought her comfort. It wasn't that she wanted to be alone. It was that she didn't know how to trust the world again. At work, Clara maintained her professionalism, but colleagues noticed the quiet sadness in her eyes. She smiled when necessary, laughed when prompted, but the brightness that had once defined her was dim. Supervisors occasionally checked in, asking if she was okay, but she waved off concern with polite words. Deep down, she knew that no amount of external support could heal the emptiness she felt. It was a burden she carried alone, invisible yet heavy. One rainy evening, as she drove home from work, the streets glistening with reflections of city lights, Clara allowed herself to think about what her life had become. She thought about Mark's cruel words, the endless arguments, and the nights spent crying alone. She thought about her children and the future she wanted for them, a future free from fear, filled with love and stability. But the thought of creating that future without hope felt impossible. The rain tapped against the windshield, echoing the rhythm of her heart, steady yet heavy with sorrow. It was in that moment, as the rain blurred the world outside her car, that Clara admitted something to herself she hadn't said in years. She had lost hope. Not just hope in her marriage or in Mark, but hope in love, in kindness, in life itself. She felt as if the foundation beneath her had crumbled, leaving her suspended in a void where everything familiar and comforting was gone. The realization was painful, but also strangely clarifying. For the first time, she allowed herself to see the truth clearly. She could no longer rely on anyone else to make her happy, and the path forward was uncertain. That night, Clara went home, tucked her children into bed, and sat alone in the quiet of the living room. She stared at the walls, at the photos of happier times, and allowed herself to feel every ounce of sadness she had been suppressing. She cried not just for the love that was lost, but for the trust that had been broken, for the dreams that had been deferred, and for the woman she once was. Yet even in her despair, there was a faint ember of strength, a small reminder that she had survived this long despite everything. Clara's life had reached a low point, a place where the weight of past pain pressed down with relentless force. But even in this darkness, the story was not over. She had survived betrayal, heartbreak, and disappointment. She had endured hardship and carried her children through uncertainty. And somewhere deep inside, a tiny part of her still held the potential to believe again, even if she could not yet see how. For now, all Clara could do was sit with her feelings, let herself grieve, and acknowledge the truth she had been avoiding for so long. She had lost hope. But this moment, as heavy as it was, would mark the beginning of a journey. A journey that would test her, challenge her, and eventually lead her to a place she could not yet imagine, a place where hope, against all odds, might find her once more. Clara's decision to take her children away from the city for a while was spontaneous, almost instinctive. She had felt suffocated by the walls of her home, the constant reminders of her past struggles, and the oppressive weight of memories tied to Mark. She wanted space, not just the physical kind, but the kind that allowed her mind and heart to breathe. That weekend, she packed a few essentials for herself and her children and drove to the small ranch that had belonged to her late grandfather in rural Montana. The journey itself was a quiet one. The city gradually faded behind her, replaced by rolling hills, fields of golden grass, and skies so wide and blue that they seemed to stretch forever. The kids, sensing the change in pace, chattered excitedly, pointing out cows, horses, and birds along the road. Clara felt a flicker of relief, a small but welcome reminder that life still held moments of simple beauty. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to relax, letting the hum of the car and the vast landscape calm her restless mind. Arriving at the ranch, Clara was greeted by the familiar sight of weathered barns, a large wooden fence, and a small herd of horses grazing peacefully in the distance. The smell of hay and fresh earth filled the air. She could almost hear her grandfather's laughter in the breeze. Though she had come seeking solitude, she was also drawn by memories of warmth, safety, and family bonds that once made her feel whole. It was during her first morning on the ranch that Clara met Luke. He was a tall, strong man with weathered hands and a kind, steady presence. He had lived his entire life on the ranch, tending the land and caring for animals, and he carried himself with a quiet confidence that Clara found comforting. Luke noticed her immediately, not because she stood out dramatically, but because he could sense the weariness in her posture, the subtle tension in her eyes. He offered a polite nod and a gentle smile when she first introduced herself, and Clara felt a rare sense of ease around him. At first, interactions were brief and practical. Luke helped Clara with chores around the ranch, fixing a gate, moving hay bales, and feeding the horses. He spoke little, but his words were deliberate and kind. Unlike Mark, there was no hidden criticism or harsh judgment, only genuine guidance and support. Clara found herself appreciating the simplicity of these exchanges. No hidden agendas, no cruel games, just honest work and honest conversation. The children, sensing Luke's warmth, quickly took to him. They followed him around the property, asking questions about the animals, helping with small tasks, and laughing freely in ways Clara hadn't seen in months. Watching them, Clara felt a spark of hope. Perhaps, she thought, kindness still existed in the world, and people could still offer care without expecting anything in return. As days passed, Clara found herself drawn into the rhythm of ranch life. Mornings were filled with feeding animals, checking fences, and helping with small repairs. Afternoons were quieter, spent walking through fields, observing wildlife, or simply sitting under the shade of an old oak tree. Luke often shared stories about his own life, tales of hardship, lessons learned from the land, and the joys of simple living. Clara listened, captivated by his wisdom and the ease with which he spoke about resilience, patience, and hope. It was not an instant transformation, nor did Clara expect it to be. She still carried the weight of her past, and some days were harder than others. Memories of Mark's betrayals crept in at the most unexpected moments, a harsh word remembered, a broken promise recalled. There were times when she found herself retreating into silence, avoiding Luke and the children, lost in thoughts that threatened to pull her back into despair. But Luke never pressured her. He gave her space while quietly offering support, always present yet never intrusive. One particular afternoon stood out in Clara's memory. She had wandered to the edge of the pasture, watching the sun dip behind distant hills. The sky was a tapestry of pink, orange, and gold, and the air was cool with the promise of evening. Luke joined her holding 2 mugs of steaming tea. Without saying much, he handed one to her, and they stood together in companionable silence. Clara felt a strange mix of gratitude and unease. She had not known anyone could offer comfort so naturally, without judgment or expectation. In that moment, she realized that trust could be rebuilt, slowly and gently, through consistent kindness and respect. Days turned into weeks, and Clara began to notice subtle changes within herself. The tension in her shoulders eased, her laughter returned in small doses, and she began to sleep more peacefully at night. She discovered that even simple tasks, like brushing the horses or planting flowers in the garden, brought a quiet sense of accomplishment. She had forgotten how healing it was to work with her hands, to see tangible results from effort and care. Luke encouraged her gently, praising her progress without making her feel scrutinized or judged. The children thrived as well. Away from the constant tension of their home life, they ran through fields, learned to ride horses, and helped with chores. Their laughter became a balm for Clara's soul, a constant reminder that joy could exist even amidst hardship. She watched them grow more confident and independent with each passing day, and she felt a profound sense of gratitude for the sanctuary the ranch provided. Clara's interactions with Luke gradually deepened. Conversations that had once been practical began to touch on more personal topics. She spoke hesitantly at first, sharing small fragments of her past, the pain she had endured, and the fears that still lingered. Luke listened with patience and empathy, never pushing for more than she was willing to reveal. He shared his own experiences of loss and resilience, reminding her that everyone carried burdens, and that strength often grew from facing them rather than avoiding them. One evening, as they worked together repairing a fence, Clara found herself laughing at a joke Luke made. The sound startled her. It had been so long since she had laughed freely without reservation. She realized that her heart, though scarred, was beginning to open again. She could feel hope creeping in, small but persistent, reminding her that life still had beauty and connection to offer. The relationship between Clara and Luke remained slow and steady. There were no dramatic confessions or rushed emotions. Instead, there was a growing sense of trust, respect, and mutual understanding. Luke's presence was steady, like the unwavering sun over the plains, and Clara found herself leaning on that stability without fear. For the first time in years, she felt that she could rely on someone without dread, that she could experience companionship without anxiety. One day, while sitting on the porch overlooking the fields, Clara reflected on the changes she had noticed in herself. She no longer felt the constant ache of hopelessness that had weighed on her in the city. She felt stronger, more capable, and more willing to embrace life's possibilities. The ranch, with its open skies and honest labor, had provided her with a perspective she had almost forgotten. That healing was a process, and that hope could return when nurtured patiently. Clara began to embrace new activities that she had abandoned in the past. She picked up her old journal, writing down thoughts and reflections that had been trapped inside her mind for years. She discovered that putting words to her feelings helped her process emotions and reclaim a sense of self. Luke encouraged her gently, asking questions and offering support, never judgment. Through writing, Clara found a voice she had thought was lost, a voice that reminded her of her resilience and creativity. Even small acts of kindness from strangers in the nearby town reinforced her growing belief in the goodness of people. A neighbor offered fresh eggs, a shopkeeper smiled warmly and asked about her children, and a young farmer helped repair a broken tool without expecting payment. These seemingly ordinary gestures, combined with Luke's unwavering support, reminded Clara that connection and care could exist without conditions. She began to let go of the bitterness that had clouded her heart, allowing warmth and trust to seep back in. Yet Clara's past was never far away. There were moments when doubt and fear resurfaced, when the weight of years spent with Mark threatened to overshadow her progress. She sometimes questioned whether she could truly trust anyone again, whether happiness was something meant for her. But each time those thoughts arose, Luke's quiet presence, the laughter of her children, and the beauty of the Montana landscape reminded her that the past did not have to define the future. Healing was possible, one day at a time, and hope could grow even in the most unexpected places. By the end of her first month on the ranch, Clara had begun to feel a renewed sense of purpose. She no longer measured her days solely by survival or endurance. Instead, she noticed small joys, the way sunlight glinted off the horse's mane, the sound of birds singing in the morning, and the soft laughter of her children playing in the fields. These moments, though simple, reminded her that life could be beautiful again. Clara's journey on the ranch was not without challenges. Some days were difficult, filled with reminders of past pain or frustrations with the physical work required to maintain the property. But through it all, she discovered a strength within herself that had never truly disappeared. She learned to face difficulties with patience, to accept help without shame, and to find comfort in the presence of someone who cared genuinely and without expectation. By the time the weekend came to a close, Clara felt a transformation within herself. She had arrived at the ranch weighed down by despair, unsure if life could ever hold joy again. But she left with a flicker of hope, a renewed sense of possibility, and a belief that kindness, trust, and genuine connection still existed. The journey ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, Clara felt ready to face it. After weeks of staying at the ranch, Clara had begun to feel a sense of calm she hadn't experienced in years. The weight of her past, though still present in quiet moments, seemed less suffocating. Her mind, which had been clouded with constant worry and despair, was now opening to the possibility that life could be more than just survival. Each day on the ranch brought new experiences, small victories, and gentle reminders that hope could return when nurtured patiently. Clara's mornings had a new rhythm. She woke before sunrise, listening to the soft neighing of the horses and the quiet rustle of the wind through the trees. She poured a cup of tea and stepped outside onto the porch, breathing in the fresh, earthy scent of the land. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, and the horizon seemed to stretch forever. These moments of solitude gave her space to reflect, to feel gratitude, and to reconnect with herself. She realized that even in the hardest times, beauty existed, and noticing it could bring peace. Luke's presence remained constant, steady, and comforting. He continued to work alongside Clara in the fields, guiding her with patience and respect. He never rushed her, never demanded anything, and never judged her for the mistakes she had made in the past. In his company, Clara felt a sense of safety that had been absent from her life for far too long. Slowly, she began to open up about herself, sharing stories she had once locked away in the corners of her heart. One afternoon, as they worked together repairing a corral fence, Clara spoke about her childhood, her dreams, and the challenges she had faced. Luke listened attentively, offering gentle encouragement, but never interrupting or imposing his own views. His presence was reassuring, not just because of his kindness, but because he allowed her to speak without fear of judgment. Clara found herself trusting him more with each passing day, realizing that connection could be genuine and unconditional. Her children flourished in this environment. Away from the tension and uncertainty of their home life, they played freely, exploring the fields, climbing trees, and learning to ride horses. Their laughter filled the air, echoing across the ranch, and it brought Clara a deep sense of joy. She watched them grow more confident, more independent, and more resilient, and she felt proud of how well they were adapting. Seeing her children happy reminded her that she had the power to create a better life for them, even amidst the shadows of her past. Clara also began to reconnect with her own passions. She had once loved writing, but the stress of her marriage had made it nearly impossible to focus on anything for herself. Now, with the quiet of the ranch and the gentle encouragement from Luke, she picked up her journal again. Each word she wrote seemed to release some of the tension she had carried for so long. Writing became a form of therapy, a way to process her emotions and understand herself better. Luke noticed her dedication and offered support, celebrating her progress without ever pressuring her. As the weeks turned into months, Clara realized that she was slowly rebuilding her sense of self. She discovered strength she had forgotten existed: patience, creativity, resilience, and the ability to find joy in small moments. Luke's steady support had helped her see that healing was possible, but it was her own effort and willingness to embrace change that made the transformation real. She understood that hope wasn't something that could be given. It was something one had to nurture and allow to grow. One evening, after a long day of work in the fields, Luke suggested they take a break and sit under the old oak tree near the barn. The sky was clear, dotted with stars, and the air was cool and crisp. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the children play nearby. Clara felt a warmth in her chest, a feeling she hadn't experienced in years: contentment. She realized that moments like these, simple yet profound, were what she had been missing. Life wasn't about grand gestures or perfect circumstances. It was about finding peace and joy in the present. During these quiet moments, Clara also began to notice subtle changes in herself emotionally. She felt less guarded, more open to connection, and more willing to take risks in trusting others. The fear that had once held her back was still present, but it no longer dominated her thoughts. She found herself laughing more easily, smiling more often, and engaging more freely with her children and Luke. These changes were gradual, almost imperceptible at first, but over time they became undeniable. Clara also learned to face her fears and confront the pain of her past. With Luke's gentle support, she began to talk openly about Mark, about the betrayal, the heartbreak, and the moments that had left scars. Speaking about these experiences was difficult, but it also brought relief. She realized that sharing her story didn't make her weak, it made her stronger. Each time she spoke of her past, she felt a little lighter, a little freer, and a little more capable of embracing the present. Luke, too, shared pieces of his own life with her. He spoke of challenges he had faced growing up on the ranch, of losses he had endured, and of lessons he had learned about resilience and patience. His stories were not dramatic or sensational, but they carried a quiet wisdom that resonated with Clara. She appreciated his honesty and humility, and she realized that strength often came not from grand accomplishments, but from enduring life's difficulties with integrity and kindness. The children continued to thrive under this new environment. They learned the value of hard work, responsibility, and empathy. Clara watched them interact with the animals, care for the land, and help one another with tasks around the ranch. She saw the joy and pride in their eyes when they accomplished something on their own, and it filled her with a sense of fulfillment she hadn't felt in years. She knew that providing this safe, nurturing space for her children was one of the most important things she could do, and it gave her a renewed sense of purpose. As Clara grew stronger emotionally, she also began to notice her relationship with Luke deepening. It wasn't a sudden, dramatic romance, but a slow, steady connection built on trust, respect, and mutual support. They shared moments of laughter, quiet reflection, and meaningful conversation. Clara found herself looking forward to spending time with him, feeling a sense of comfort and security she had never known before. Luke's presence was grounding, a constant reminder that kindness and care could exist in the world. One particularly memorable day, Clara and Luke worked together to repair a section of the barn roof that had been damaged in a recent storm. The work was hard, requiring coordination, effort, and patience. As they lifted beams and secured boards, they laughed at small mistakes and encouraged each other when tasks felt difficult. By the end of the day, the barn was repaired, and both felt a sense of accomplishment. That evening, as they sat on the porch with cold drinks in hand, Clara realized that life could be fulfilling again, not just for herself, but for her children as well. The transformation within Clara was not without its challenges. Some days, memories of her past would resurface unexpectedly, bringing fear and sadness. There were moments when she questioned whether she deserved happiness or whether the wounds she carried would ever fully heal. But with each challenge, she found herself growing stronger. She learned to acknowledge her emotions without letting them control her, to face her fears without running, and to embrace the possibility of joy without guilt. Clara also began to understand the importance of self-compassion. She realized that she had been too hard on herself for years, blaming herself for circumstances beyond her control. She learned to forgive herself, to recognize her own worth, and to treat herself with the same kindness she extended to others. This shift in perspective was profound, allowing her to approach life with a greater sense of balance, patience, and hope. By the time several months had passed, Clara's life on the ranch had become a source of renewal and growth. She had rediscovered passions, nurtured her children, built trust, and embraced the beauty of small, meaningful moments. Her relationship with Luke had become a foundation of stability and support, one built on shared experiences, empathy, and genuine care. For the first time in years, Clara felt that life could hold joy, connection, and hope. She understood that healing was a journey, not a destination. There would be setbacks, moments of doubt, and challenges ahead, but she no longer feared them. She had learned to face life with resilience, patience, and an open heart. The past, with all its pain and disappointment, no longer defined her. Instead, it had shaped her into someone stronger, wiser, and more capable of embracing the possibilities of the present. One evening, as Clara watched the sun set over the Montana plains, she felt a deep sense of gratitude. The sky was a brilliant blend of colors, and the air was filled with the sounds of animals and children playing. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the hardships, the heartbreak, and the moments of despair. And she realized that those experiences, painful as they had been, had prepared her to fully appreciate the hope and joy she now felt. Clara knew that her life was not perfect, nor did she expect it to be. But it was real and it was hers. She had survived the storms of her past, rebuilt her strength, and opened her heart to the possibility of love and happiness once more. With Luke by her side and her children thriving in this new environment, she felt ready to face whatever the future held. For the first time in a long while, she believed that hope was not just a distant dream, but a reality she could live each day. And so Clara's journey of healing continued. Each day brought new lessons, small victories, and the quiet joy of life's simple pleasures. She had learned that trust, kindness, and resilience could coexist, that love could be gentle and patient, and that hope could be nurtured even in the most unexpected places. With every sunrise over the Montana plains, Clara felt a renewed sense of purpose, strength, and possibility. A reminder that life, even after great pain, could still be beautiful and full of hope. By the time spring arrived at the ranch, Clara felt a sense of renewal that she had never imagined possible. The cold, heavy weight of despair that had once pressed down on her chest had lifted, replaced with a quiet, steady warmth. Life still had its challenges, of course, but they no longer defined her. She had learned to face difficulty with patience, to trust herself, and to embrace the beauty in simple moments. More importantly, she had rediscovered hope, a fragile, glowing thing that she now knew could grow if nurtured carefully. Each morning, Clara woke to the sounds of the ranch, the soft rustling of the wind through the trees, the distant neighing of horses, and the laughter of her children as they ran barefoot across the fields. She would pour herself a cup of tea, step onto the porch, and watch the sunrise. The sky stretched wide and endless, its colors changing slowly from deep indigo to shades of gold and pink. In these moments, Clara felt the full weight of gratitude. She had survived so much, and now she was alive, truly alive, in a way she hadn't known in years. Luke was always nearby, tending to the animals or guiding the children as they explored the land. His presence had become as steady and comforting as the mountains themselves. He never pressured her, never demanded anything, and never judged her past. Instead, he offered quiet support, laughter, and understanding. Over time, Clara realized that what she had once thought impossible, trust, love, and genuine connection, was becoming part of her life again. She felt safe in his presence, a feeling she had not known since before the years of heartbreak and betrayal. Clara's children were thriving as well. Away from the tension of city life, they were becoming more confident, independent, and joyful. They rode horses, helped with chores, and discovered the satisfaction of contributing to the daily life of the ranch. Their laughter filled every corner of the land, echoing in the hills, reminding Clara that happiness could exist even after hardship. She watched them with pride, realizing that providing a stable, loving environment for them was one of the greatest gifts she could offer. Over the months, Clara continued to reconnect with herself. She wrote in her journal almost daily, exploring thoughts and emotions that had been buried for years. She found joy in small projects around the ranch, planting flowers, repairing fences, and caring for the animals. Each completed task brought a sense of accomplishment, reinforcing the knowledge that she was capable, resilient, and deserving of happiness. Slowly, the fog of her past began to lift, replaced by clarity, purpose, and a quiet confidence. Luke and Clara's relationship deepened, though it remained gentle and unhurried. They shared quiet meals on the porch, walks across the fields, and long conversations under the stars. Clara appreciated that there were no grand gestures or dramatic confessions, just a steady, reliable presence, a man who showed kindness in actions rather than words alone. She began to understand that true love didn't have to be overwhelming. It could be calm, patient, and sustaining. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the horizon and painted the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, Clara sat with Luke on a blanket in the field. The children played nearby, their laughter carrying on the soft evening breeze. Clara felt a sense of peace that was almost unfamiliar. She realized that she no longer feared the future as she had before. The past, with all its pain, no longer held the power to control her emotions or her choices. She was free to embrace life fully, to accept joy, and to trust in the goodness of people once again. Clara's growth was not without reflection. She often thought about her past, about Mark and the heartbreak he had caused. But these thoughts no longer brought despair. Instead, they reminded her of how far she had come. She had survived emotional betrayal, heartbreak, and years of uncertainty. She had fought through despair and had chosen, day after day, to rebuild herself. Each memory of the past became a lesson, a proof of her resilience, and a reason to value the life she now had. As spring deepened into summer, Clara began to plan for the future. She considered ways to create a more permanent life for her children on the ranch. She explored community projects, school opportunities, and personal goals she had long put aside. Writing, once a quiet hobby, had become a meaningful outlet for self-expression, and she began considering the possibility of sharing her stories with others, helping people who had experienced similar hardships. For the first time in years, Clara felt a sense of agency over her life. She was no longer merely surviving, she was living with purpose and intention. Her bond with Luke grew stronger through shared experiences and mutual support. They celebrated small victories together, repairing a broken fence, tending a garden, or teaching the children new skills. They laughed freely, shared stories, and offered comfort during moments of challenge. Clara began to see him not only as a partner in life, but as a source of inspiration. His patience, integrity, and quiet strength reminded her that hope could be nurtured patiently, and that love could be gentle yet steadfast. One day, while the children were exploring the woods near the ranch, Clara and Luke took a long walk along a narrow path lined with wildflowers. They spoke about dreams, fears, and aspirations, sharing their hopes for the future without judgment or fear. Clara realized how much she had changed, how much she had healed. She no longer carried the heavy weight of hopelessness. Instead, she felt light, open, and ready to embrace the unknown. Luke's unwavering support had shown her that a new life was possible, one built on trust, kindness, and shared joy. The transformation in Clara was evident not only in her actions, but in her demeanor. She moved with confidence, spoke with clarity, and approached challenges with patience. Her laughter, once rare, was now a frequent and genuine part of her day. Her children, inspired by her strength, mirrored her confidence and curiosity. The ranch, once a simple escape, had become a place of renewal, growth, and profound healing for the entire family. Clara's perspective on life had shifted in subtle but meaningful ways. She no longer measured success by wealth, recognition, or control. Instead, she valued connection, empathy, and the quiet satisfaction of contributing to the well-being of those she loved. She had learned that happiness was not a distant goal, but a series of moments to be recognized, cherished, and nurtured. Each day brought opportunities for gratitude, joy, and growth, and Clara embraced them fully. Luke and Clara's connection continued to flourish naturally. They celebrated milestones quietly, an especially productive day on the ranch, a new skill learned by the children, or a beautiful sunset witnessed together. Their bond was grounded in trust, respect, and genuine affection. Clara realized that true love did not always come with dramatic declarations or grand gestures. Instead, it arrived in steady, consistent presence and unwavering support. One summer evening, as they all gathered around a small fire in the field, roasting marshmallows and sharing stories, Clara felt a profound sense of contentment. The stars shimmered above, and the warm glow of the fire reflected in the children's eyes. She looked at Luke, her children, and the peaceful landscape around her, and realized that life had changed in ways she had once thought impossible. Hope once lost had returned, not as a fleeting feeling, but as a constant companion, woven into the fabric of daily life. Clara also began to embrace the lessons of resilience and patience that the ranch had taught her. She understood that life would not always be easy, but she was equipped to handle challenges with grace and strength. She had learned to accept help without shame, to trust without fear, and to love without expectation. These lessons, hard-earned and deeply felt, gave her confidence in the choices she made and the life she had rebuilt. The children continued to grow, thriving in the environment Clara and Luke had cultivated together. They learned not only practical skills like horseback riding and gardening, but also emotional lessons, kindness, empathy, and the value of hard work. Clara felt immense pride watching them navigate their world with curiosity, confidence, and compassion. She knew that the stability, love, and guidance she provided were shaping their lives in ways that would endure long into the future. Clara's own self-discovery continued as well. She explored new hobbies, strengthened friendships, and considered ways to give back to her community. She realized that her past struggles had given her unique insight and empathy, qualities that could benefit others. Writing, mentoring, and volunteering became ways to extend the hope and healing she had found to those still struggling. This gave her life additional meaning, reinforcing the idea that hope, once nurtured, could grow and spread beyond oneself. One bright afternoon, Clara took a moment to reflect on the journey that had brought her here. She remembered the despair she had felt, the loneliness, the heartbreak, and the weight of hopelessness that had once consumed her. And yet here she was, standing in the sunlit fields of Montana, surrounded by her children, animals, and a man who had shown her the true meaning of kindness and care. The contrast was profound. She realized that hope, even when it feels impossible, is always possible with patience, resilience, and connection. As the day turned to evening, Clara and Luke sat together, watching the children play. The ranch, alive with the sounds of life, reflected the transformation she had undergone. From the depths of despair, she had risen to embrace life fully. The past, while never forgotten, no longer dictated her emotions or her choices. She had reclaimed her sense of self, her capacity for trust, and her belief in love and happiness. Clara knew that life would continue to present challenges, but she no longer feared them. She had learned that even after the darkest moments, light could return. Her journey had shown her the power of resilience, the importance of kindness, and the enduring strength of hope. With Luke by her side, her children thriving, and a renewed sense of purpose, Clara felt ready to face the future with courage and joy. In the quiet moments, as the sun set behind the mountains and the sky turned shades of violet and gold, Clara realized something profound. She had once believed that her life would always be defined by heartbreak and despair. But through patience, love, and unwavering support, she had discovered that new beginnings were possible. Hope once lost had returned, and with it came a life full of promise, joy, and connection. Clara's story, once marked by pain and hopelessness, had transformed into one of resilience, healing, and the enduring possibility of love. She had discovered that even in the darkest times, life could offer light, and that genuine kindness and trust could restore what was once thought lost. For Clara, hope was no longer a fragile ember. It had grown into a steady flame, guiding her toward a future filled with joy, purpose, and the unwavering certainty that life, even after hardship, could be beautiful.